something goes wrong in your life, whether it's a bad diagnosis or unhappiness or even a flat tire, do you feel like God is punishing you? Do you sometimes feel like whatever is happening wrong in your life, it's almost as if God is punishing you, and you sit back and you think, what did I do wrong? Or is God just playing with me? Does that sound like the God you came here to worship this morning? Does that sound like the God you cry out in the night for? Poor Job. He's had a tough time lately. As you remember, in the very beginning of Job is living large. He's got a huge family, lots of livestock, he's got his health, he's a very rich man. And his belief in God is based on that. He has been told that if things go well for him, it's because God is rewarding him for whatever it was that he did right. And then, according to Job, God and the devil get into this discussion. And the devil challenges God that if things go wrong with Job, that his life will, that Job will stop believing in God. And God apparently accepts this challenge. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like my God. But as the story of Job evolves, Job's life becomes a horror story. His family all die, his livestock all die, most of his friends abandon him, his family abandon him, and at the end, his whole body is covered with boils. And throughout all of this, his not-so-helpful friends keep saying to Job, what have you done wrong? Why is God punishing you? And Job keeps thinking, I don't think I've done anything wrong. I don't know why my life seems to be being destroyed. What is God doing? And Job begins to talk to God. Job begins to question God. Job begins to say, God, what are you doing? Why is this happening to me? And finally, at the very end, God pulls himself up into a whirlwind and says, who are you to question who I am? Were you there when I created this world? It's almost if you hear the whole story of Job, God is being some kind of cosmic bully. Kind of, I do what I want to do. Does that sound like the God you came to worship today? In the end, Job's life turns around. His family grows. He gets 14,000 sheep. His family returns to him, and he dies a full life. It's almost as if the game is over, and so therefore God will restore what is good for Job. But that does not sound like the God I came to worship today. This God that kind of plays games with us. This God that punishes us if we do something wrong to the point where we get boils covering our whole body. But this God of Job was not unusual back then. Think about the Hebrew literature. You have the God of Noah, who just kind of got impatient with everybody and drowned everybody and put some people on the ark, and that was it. Or the God of Moses, that destroyed the firstborn living child of everyone in Egypt, livestock and human, because Pharaoh would not let the people go. Does that sound like the God you came to worship today? The Greeks on another part of the Mediterranean had the same kind of understanding of gods. It was almost as if they were playing games with the humans. They either decided to punish all the humans or play with them like a cat and mouse game. Again, Does that sound like the God you call out to in the middle of the night? The God you ask for help? Now, in part, both the Hebrews and the Greeks use that understanding of God, this God of great judgment and punishment and anger, to explain what was wrong in their lives, what happened that was wrong. So if you got hit by lightning, it was something wrong in your life, not because you happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. If there was a tsunami or an earthquake, it was because you had done something wrong, your people had done something wrong, not because of some geophysical explanation. Even the sun, when it would disappear behind the clouds, it was almost as if God was saying, you're doing something wrong. But thank God that as our lives have evolved, our understanding and our communication with God has changed. 2,000 years ago, Jesus was born to kind of reframe how we see that God. When blind Bartimaeus came to Jesus, he had been told that his blindness was because he was a sinner. And not just Bartimaeus, but probably Bartimaeus' parents and his grandparents. That blindness was not an ocular deficiency, but a sinful condition. And that somehow or another Bartimaeus had been punished for this. Doesn't sound like my God. But when Bartimaeus cries out to Jesus, Jesus, Son of God, heal me, help me to see. Jesus stops in the midst of the crowd and says, bring him to me. And do you remember what Jesus said to Bartimaeus? What is it that you want me to do for you? Jesus is asking Bartimaeus, as if Jesus is also asking you, what is it that you want me to do for you? Bartimaeus says, I have been blind and I want to see. It's almost as if we are saying to Jesus in the middle of the night when we hear that voice that says, what is it that you want me to do for you? When you say, I have been blind and I want to see. I have been deaf and I want to hear. I can't seem to walk through the next day and I want to get off and walk. That sounds like the God I came here to worship. That sounds like the God that is loving, drawing us into wholeness, that is supporting us. Am I letting us off the hook here? Am I saying that our God is not a punishing God? Am I saying that when I do something wrong, that God is going to just simply love me? God may simply be loving me, but God is also continuing to pull me toward wholeness, toward that life-givingness that we have come to count on and love. Thank God we understand that when we're hit by lightning, it's because we happen to be in the wrong place. Thank God when my family dies of cancer, it's not because my family is being punished, or it's because we have the sins of our fathers and grandfathers. It's just because we happen to have cancer in our family. But it's not an understanding of God as a punisher. It's an understanding that when I walk through the halls of Sloan Kettering, God is not punishing me, but walking next to me. God is present with me. That God asks, when I want to see, I can see. When I want to hear, I can hear. When I want to walk, God will help me. God will be walking with me. heavens, our view has transformed of that punishing God. As some of you know, I work with addicts and alcoholics. And as I was beginning to offer classes for spiritual development, I was with a group of women who had been battered and abused. And as part of the sort of welcoming, I said, now sit in silence and talk to God. And there was a whole bunch of squirming. There was this, oh my, there was this twitching. And the whole room was not at peace. And I finally had to stop and say, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Why is it that you can't find silence? And their response was, it's not we can't find silence, it's that we don't particularly like God. God has always punished us. We have been told that our abuse, that our addiction, that our whatever went wrong with us in our lives, whether it was our fathers, our brothers, our boyfriends and husbands, whomever, when we became addicted to heroin, it was our fault. Their image of the God was the God of punishment, the God of judgment. And so we had to switch and come back and understand that the God of Jesus, the God of us, is not the God of judgment, but the God of wholeness, the God of love. Certainly the God of accountability, but also the God that wants what's best for us. On Monday nights, we've begun to talk about grace with Sue Wentworth. And we've begun to understand what that grace means. That grace is given. It pulls us toward God. It envelops us. That sounds like the God we came here to worship today. That sounds like the God that we call out to in the middle of the night. That sounds like the God who, when we ask, we will be healed.